focus on this area. We don't know yet. Right. Mainly compare, basically want to compare the quantitative and qualitative. In what way they differ, right? As we went through yesterday, most of it we described. Usually start with a theory, test relationship, hard and real, hard meaning numbers. You answer whether two or three, right? Hard and numbers and real. Favorite method is survey and experiments. That's an experiment, you're measuring some, let's say, some parameters, example, cholesterol level, all this, they become quantitative. This is meant to test hypothesis. Example, you want to test hypothesis. Is there a relationship between age and systolic blood pressure? So the testing and hypothesis, testing whether there is a relationship between age and systolic blood pressure. So you measure the age, measure the systolic blood pressure, and use some statistical tests like correlation analysis to establish if there is an association. So this is deductive nature, deductive meaning top down, right? Elsewhere, there has been some association found to be associated. Elsewhere, age has been found to be associated with BP. So here, in this group of people, you want to test same thing. So from universal to the point of reference. This approach typically concentrates on measuring, counting, right? Collecting data, numerical data analysis, example, mean, median, standard deviation, all these are numerical, apply statistical test, right? So this summarizes the quantitative data analysis, part of it, which we discussed yesterday. Right, qualitative on the other hand, this approach is softer and personal here. Softer meaning it's no hard force rule, answer this or that. Be able to talk to them, right? And listen to them, personal matters, right? So it's more softer and personal. Methods used include what? Include accounts, unstructured interviews, participation observation. So these kind of methods are used. The purpose is to gain an understanding of the underlying reason. So this is gaining understanding. This is testing whether it's true or not. So this is deductive nature, gaining understanding. So this inductive in nature, so the bottom up, understand the basics, and generally, main reason is creating or generating hypothesis. Here, testing hypothesis, meaning top down. This is generating hypothesis, bottom up. So this is generally inductive. Remember the basic difference is testing hypothesis, whether there's a relationship between, example, age and BP. This is generating hypothesis. Let's say you find every time I take a person's age and BP, they seem to be highly correlated. And generally we can form some hypothesis. Is it true? In nature, they are associated. So forming hypothesis, other one is testing hypothesis. Right. The basic difference between these two in terms of approach, how they differ in terms of approach, techniques used, responses, outcome. So you can generalize quantity and quality in terms of the differences in approach, techniques used, response, and also outcome. Let's go to approach. Qualitative is flexible and informal. Example, interviews, focus groups. There's no structure here. We call a group of people, let them talk about it. It's an informal session. Whereas quantitative, structured and formal. In the questionnaire, we are putting, you answer whether you have this problem on a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're structuring it. And formal. We answer only these questions, whereas here is informal and flexible. Here we do not need to know in advance specific topics or questions. So you don't have to go with a problem statement, but normally people do. But here you must know in advance. Example, social support. Social support is helpful for depression, let's say. So you must know in advance. Then you must measure social support and your depression. So imposing the relationship between social support and depression, and all are structured and formal. Let's say 100 respondents, all are given the same questionnaire, right? Very formal method of assessing. So this is imposed. That means I give a question 1 to 7 questions. Yesterday the Likert scale question, DAS 21, 7 items. Each one is called 0, 1, 2, 3. So you only ask them to mark 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 means not at all. 3 means all the time. So based on what they mark, they're imposing them to mark one of the 4. So based on that, we do some assessment. Whereas here, as we talk to them, we see what themes or something emerge from the. Right? We talk to them as see what are themes emerge. Example, you want to know the vaccination for COVID, right? So what people think of COVID vaccination. So take a group of people, let's say 6 people, sit down and pose a topic. Okay, today you want to talk about COVID vaccination. So the 6 people voice out what they think about vaccination. Some say we should, some say we should not, and what themes emerge. When the people say we should not vaccinate, we ask them a question, why do you say so? A lot of themes will emerge. So that's why I'm trying to capture in the qualitative. The quantitative, we can't ask why, right? Can't go in depth. So we just ask them to answer a set of questions. So usually the sample size can't be very large because interviewing individuals takes time and coverage. You can't be traveling like nationwide to do the study. But here, usually large sample. You can put all the questions in a Google form and send it out, right? Matter of time, wider spread, large sample size can be covered, right? So later people ask question, the evidence, is it better based on large sample or small sample? We can't actually make it equal this and this. Large sample, of course, more generalizable. Small samples may not be generalizable. By small sample, we are able to go in depth. A large sample, even though more coverage, we are not. So that's in terms of approach. Techniques used. So here use unstructured interviews, but here structured interviews and questionnaire. So structured interviews, the same question we asked, structured interviews, same question we asked the every individual. Here unstructured, we may not have the same question we asked. Depending on the situation, you may want to change the questions or not, right? Document analysis. Here surveys, here document analysis, right? You want to know what's happening or what has happened, you open up documents and search what has happened, especially in medical areas, right? Or in the information services or in trade, we look at the documents. Participant observation, right? You can be one of the participants. Let's say you want to observe the workers, how they perform their duties, whatever. You can join in as a worker, participant observation, without the knowledge of the others, and observe what's happening in the workplace, participant observation. Here, non-participant observation, often your checklist, okay? Checklist, example, patient behavior. You have checklist, let's say 10 items. Did they perform or not? Let's say now hand washing, right? Hand washing, let's say we have a checklist, whether they perform or not. So we have a checklist, complete checklist, right? That is quantitative. Out of 10 points, how many they perform? Out of 10 points, they perform 8 points. So we have a number here. Diaries, right? A person dies, commits suicide, whatever. We want to know what is written. Those days, we look at diaries. But nowadays, we look at the Facebook, right? Still qualitative. Here, experiments. We want to know whether a drug is effective for treatment of a disease. So first phase, maybe we test with animals. So animals, again, experimenting. What comes out is quantitative. Case studies, right? Case study series, you want to see how the disease develop, what's the prognosis, whatever it is. Case studies, right? You can take individual cases, case files, and study in detail. Study in detail. Here, tests, right? Test whether the drug is effective and this kind of things. So in terms of technique, they may differ in this manner, right? For example, the example asks you, in terms of technique, how do these two differ? Right? There can be four options, only one is correct. So again, you must know basically how they differ. Comparing these two again, responses. What kind of response you have? Here, explanatory and deep in depth. But the person say, I will not take the vaccine. We ask him in depth, why? What's the reason? Say in depth. Whereas he is not. Let's say I give a questionnaire, are you willing to take the vaccine? Yes, no. Then ask him why, right? Again, there is always some will be better here, some will be better here. That's why nowadays people want for mixed method. Here mainly verbal, here mainly numerical. Like questionnaire, they take one of the responses, one of the responses given. Let's say Likert scale 1, 2, 3, 4, then scale 1. So numerical, here verbal, we can record it or we can write it down the responses. Not easily processed, right? Whether you're recording or transcribing, it's not that easy. Record, transcribe, code it, it's not easy. But here, the questionnaire comes in, data collected, put into some software like SPSS, click some button, the answer comes up. Anybody can analyze it if you know exactly what you want to know. But here it's not. The tone of the voice, how the word is said, right? All these we need as professional in this area to perform this. But here, once you know the content, anybody can do this analysis. Outcome. So what are the outcome of these two now? The outcome, here's the results. Example, is there a relationship between age and VP? Testing. Answer is yes or no. Whereas here, hypothesis and ideas. Remember, qualitative, generate hypothesis. Quantitative, test hypothesis. I want the results. Here, generating hypothesis or ideas. What ideas crop up from there? Not firm, because I take one set of focus group, we take another set, whatever ideas came out may be different. Whereas here, the same questionnaire given to even 1,000 people, it can be quantified because all are numerical, right? Danger of subjective interpretation. What is said, how is said, right? How to interpret what a person with the detailed experience in this case will be able to perform this. Whereas interpretation are more subjective. Example, let's say BP, right? You measure the BP in a group of workers, the mean BP is 150. The mean BP 150 numerical. And you know more than 140 is not normal. Example, okay? Not normal for a particular age group. So you can interpret more meaningfully. Right, BMI. BMI means BMI is 30. So we know 30 means obese. But here, we can't make such objective interpretations. Again, very subjective, may differ between the analysts. Different researchers may interpret the same thing differently, but here it's universal. So, we ask you what's the basic difference between this? How do they differ by approach? Right, only one option will be correct. how do they differ in terms of technique used, how they differ in terms of responses, and how they differ in terms of outcome. So you're able to provide right answers for this. Right? So this further additional notes, quantitative, qualitative, and how they differ in terms of approach, techniques used, responses, and outcome. Right.